Filipino strongman Rodrigo Duterte cut his teeth and bloodied his hands as the authoritarian mayor of Davao City, a sprawling city in the large southern island of Mindanao. He was widely seen as having pacified the city of its criminal elements and ran on his record there during his presidential run in 2016, which he won. However, during his term, the island continued to experience violence under a new threat, ISIS. He was forced to team up with former enemies that had fought the Philippine state for independence. Our story today is the story of this island and its long, shaky status between the two great archipelago nations of the world. Settled by Austronesian peoples near the end of the Neolithic, Mindanao became a gateway between what is now Indonesia and the rest of the Philippines, first disseminating Hinduism and Buddhism to the rest of the island, then adopting Islam in the 14th century as that faith took hold among the peoples of Malaysia and Indonesia. Over time, Mindanao became home to a number of Muslim sultanates, while the rest of the Philippines was home to petty kingdoms of mixed religious affiliation and countless smaller tribes. Once the Spanish Empire discovered the archipelago in 1521, they set to conquering it, capturing the large city of Manila in 1571 from the Muslim kingdom of Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines. Manila would remain the capital of any archipelago-wide government from then on. Like their empire in Mexico, however, pacification of the rest of the Philippines would take much longer, and the Moros of Mindanao, Moors, after the old Muslim rulers of Spain, gave the most savage fight, with help from the Muslim kingdom of Brunei on the island of Borneo. A combination of jungle guerrillas, restive natives in the rest of the islands, and Moro pirates kept the Spanish at bay until 1898. 1898 was the fateful year the Spanish passed out of the picture and were replaced by the gracious Americans. The United States government made vague promises of support for independence for the Filipinos in return for native support in their war against Spain. However, the December 1898 Treaty of Paris, which concluded the Spanish-American War, had America paying $20 million to the Spanish for the Philippines. Anti-imperialist mega-capitalist Andrew Carnegie offered to buy the islands instead, but for some reason, the president refused. The Provisional Philippines Republic and the U.S. quickly went to war in February 1899 once it became clear that the Americans had no intentions of letting the Filipinos self-govern. As a guerrilla war raged in the rest of the country, the Sulu Sultanate in the south had been promised a maintenance of the autonomy it had managed to claw from the Spanish, with an official treaty being signed by the Sultan and President McKinley. However, after the First Republic was crushed and its leaders captured, America once again showed their trustworthiness, with President Teddy Roosevelt nullifying the treaty in 1904. Unlike the Spanish, the Americans, many of their commanders having had just finished exterminating the natives of North America, were effective at neutralizing the Moros, although these die-hard fighters led to the adoption of heavier calibers of pistol ammunition, as the .38 revolvers American soldiers were issued did not seem to slow down Moro warriors enough to avoid getting killed during pacification raids. The American-Philippine Wars lasted until 1913 and killed an estimated 250,000 people, mostly native civilians killed by American forces. When the Japanese landed, the Moros welcomed the breakdown in centralized power from Manila, but gladly fought both Japanese army detachments as well as the liberating armies of the Americans and their Filipino allies. However, with the return of Filipino independence in 1946, Moro resistance lowered significantly. While still fiercely protective of their Islamic faith against the Christian majority of the rest of the archipelago, they were content to keep themselves on Mindanao. However, Manila caused a new crisis under the government of Ferdinand Marcos, whose son, Ferd Jr., or Bong Bong, is the new president of the Philippines as of 2022. Marcos, like most authoritarians, was an expansionist and saw the Malaysian state of Sabah as really belonging to him. To this end, he authorized a covert team of Filipino army recruits, all Moro youths trained in close-quarters combat, to infiltrate Sabah in 1967 and destabilize the government there. After months of training, a mutiny occurred in March 1968, and while there is no consensus of what actually caused the mutiny, much like the 1857 Sepoy Rebellion in India, it is likely that the Moro soldiers were made aware of their secret mission's goals and refused to fight the fellow Muslims of Malaysia. The massacre of dozens of recruits set off a new era in the Moro fight for independence. At first, the reaction to the Jabada massacre was the formation of peaceful political parties advocating for secession and autonomy, including the Moro National Liberation Front. However, in 1972, President Marcos declared the country under martial law, abolished Congress, and began ruling by decree. The loss of political advocacy turned the MNLF into a guerrilla operation, and they began their war that year with the help of sympathetic parties such as the Kingdom of Malaysia and the President of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. While representing the Muslim-majority island and benefiting from overseas Muslim funding, the MNLF is officially a secular group. Its breakaway party, the MILF, founded in 1977, however, is openly Islamic, although it propounds a democratic, non-fundamentalist following of the faith. In a parallel to the Sikh conflict in India, the destruction of the city of Jolo and its historic mosques during a 1974 Philippine army invasion of the city to wrest control away from the MNLF caused outrage among the civilian population of Mindanao and increased support for the rebels. The same year, a massive massacre of 1,500 Moro men was undertaken by the army during Ramadan, with their women being raped. Christian militias also joined in anti-Islamic killings with the blessings of Manila, with Marcos fighting his own democidal war against the civilians of the rest of the country. The MNLF and MILF retaliated with bombing attacks and raids on Filipino army units and continued to gain and maintain hold in villages and rural areas all over Mindanao. The Marcos regime could not hold on to power forever, and on February 25, 1986, Fernando and his family fled to the United States, where he died in exile 3 years later, never having answered for his crimes, probably 50,000 dead, mostly civilians, in his war against the Moro, among many more thousands of civilians in the rest of the Philippines. The return of democracy did not immediately end the push for Mindanao independence. Indeed, following the chaos after Marcos fled, a short-lived Mindanao Republic was proclaimed by a moderate social democrat, Ruben Canoy. He would do it again in 1990, both times swiftly being put down. The MNLF did eventually shift from secession to autonomism during this period, however, and in 1996 finally signed a ceasefire with the government in Manila, which guaranteed significant autonomy for Mindanao, with the MNLF leader made the leader of the region. The MILF was unimpressed with the results and continued to resist. Another, more fundamentalist group called Abu Sayyaf, founded by ex-Mujahideen in 1991, started becoming more active, and it was far less discriminating with its bombings, often suicide attacks, beheadings, and mass rape. With the beginning of the global war on terror declared by the United States in 2001, greater support was given to Manila to crush the rebels, and the MILF too moderated their stance on political autonomy in 2011, eventually agreeing to a permanent ceasefire with the Philippines government in 2014. The MNLF actually started assisting the Filipino army starting in 2013 against what it saw as a perversion of Islam, Abu Sayyaf, which soon after pledged an oath of allegiance to ISIS, becoming Islamic State East Asia Province. Rodrigo Duterte ran in 2016 on crushing crime and terrorism all over the archipelago and set right to work against drug dealers, communist insurgents, and ISIS in Mindanao. The campaign climaxed in the 5-month siege of Marawi, where Philippines armed forces supported by the MNLF and MILF paramilitary fought an extremely bloody street-to-street battle where more than 99% of the ISIS soldiers fought to the death and dozens of civilians died. ISIS in Mindanao since then has been, ironically, headless, and attacks have significantly decreased. Duterte, who once even supported secular Mindanao secession in 2005 and an admirer of federalism, was willing to discuss more autonomy with his ex-rivals, the MNLF and MILF, and in 2019 a referendum was overwhelmingly passed, which led to the establishment of the Bangsa Moro, that is, the Moro Nation, autonomous region with MILF leader Murad Ibrahim as head. With the decommissioning of the MILF almost complete as of 2023, Mindanao may settle down for the foreseeable future. Its fierce people have throughout the centuries been able to fight for at least some freedom from the rest of the archipelago. And should the central state seek to renege on their agreements, it is likely the MNLF and MILF will take up arms again. As the great Irish liberal John Philpott Curran noted, "The condition upon which God hath given liberty to man is eternal vigilance." Springtime of Nations continues to believe that the Moro people will maintain that vigilance into the future. Long live the Bangsamoro, and may 1,000 flowers bloom.